What I'm going to show you now is an inset lid. I'm going to make a lid for this piece. This is a little sodium silicate with black iron oxide stretched out after putting, so I threw a straight cylinder, put on the black iron oxide between two lines, and then put on sodium silicate, heat gunned it, and that caused that nice little texture. So I'm going to make a lid for that, an inset lid. And I will be throwing this upside down. Pretty certain that's the only way to throw this, but I've been proven wrong before. This up. So I'm actually starting with way too much clay because this is going to be a fairly small lid. But I'd rather start with too much and trim some off than not enough, especially for the video's sake. So I already took the measurement of the inside of my piece, and I'll show you that just to show you how to do it. I use a lid master. You can use a caliper. So we'll stop this for a quick second. So I take this inside and measure this. Okay. Then I want to be really cautious not to bump this or change this, make it too big, too small, change it in any way, shape, or form. Then I'm going to open this just like I would anything else. I'm going to kind of recenter it because I knocked it off a little bit. That clicking you hear is just the bat that doesn't fit very well on here. If I was throwing a bigger piece, it would be a big annoyance, but something small like this is not a big deal. So I'm going to open this almost to the width that I have that caliper measured to. Then I'm going to come out here and I'm going to take my thumb, slowly press, and if it gets a little dry, just add a little bit into that little ravine. Yeah, I'm looking at this as way too much clay. Okay, so this essentially will be a lid. Again, I said it was upside down. I've flipped this over into my bowl, but you won't get to see the end result in this video. But I could show a picture of it in the comments. Okay, I'm going to pull this up just a little bit just to thin it out and give a little bit more of a lid seat that will sit inside my pot. I don't want it to be too thin though, otherwise they'll chip right here, especially if you're doing like alternative firings where it's a fast firing and you may bump it on things. And the fact that it's going to be fired at such a low temperature, maybe 1900 degrees, bisque fired only, it'll be more fragile. If I was firing this to cone 10, I could do whatever I wanted with it. So I just added a little aesthetic in there, just a little spiral. Now I'm going to measure with my lid master. So it fits very snugly, and I want to make sure it goes all the way down. So I started making a line right there. That means it goes out, which means it wouldn't fit inside my piece. So I'm going to push that in just a little bit with my finger. Clean that up a little bit. So I like to make these slant in just a little bit, but I do want it to fit very, very snug. I don't want it to move more than, say, a centimeter, maybe even a millimeter. I want it to just barely click as I move it around. Otherwise, they move around and it doesn't fit the pot just right. And I want to make sure that the bottom down here, where I push down, is as close as I can as close as humanly possible to as low as the inside is. Sometimes when I used to do it, I'd take my needle tool, measure the inside, and measure the outside. But I want them very close so I don't have a whole lot of extra weight. Otherwise, you'll have a ton of weight out here. So if this is low, about this quarter inch, and this is ½ inch, you're going to have a ton of clay over here. So now I don't want this to stick out that far on my pot. I just want it to be over to where it sits on top of my pot. You can have them stick out as far as you want, but I'm going to trim a little bit of this off. That's why I said in the beginning I started with way too much clay. That was a lot of excess clay. I don't like to overuse clay. I mean, I can definitely recycle this, which I will. But no reason to waste clay if you're at home making pots and using minimal amounts of clay, saving money. Just start with, you'll learn over time what you need. So now I'm going to trim this little angle here almost as if it was any other pot. Get it nice and sharp. Trim that excess off. So again, this is upside down. Then I just want to clean it up a little bit, and I always make sure that this part here is domed or concave so that it sits right on top, and you don't have a pot that's like this and the lid sits over the top and hangs over. I want it to be nice and semi-flush, if you will. So I'm going to round that right now. And what I mean by that, as far as the technique goes, is I want to make sure that this point right here is higher than anywhere else in here, so that it sits right on top of my pot and it's more flush. Now it's okay if you have this trimmed out or if it's out too far, because the next day when I cut this off and trim it, I can always trim in, but you don't want to make, you want to make sure that it's not too short, because obviously you can't add more clay once it's past a certain dryness. And you could, and I'm sure there's a fancy decor you could make out of it, but as far as making an essential lid just on its own, I'd rather make it too big than too little. Okay, so that is the inset lid. Again, just little cleanup here and there, rounding things off. Make sure that this is the highest point than anywhere else. And I always double check my measurements at the end. Fits nice and snug, so just barely smaller. And that is the inset lid. After I got it trimmed, I'd flip it over. I like to add handles to them. Sometimes I add the handles when they're leather hard and I score and slip them on. Sometimes I want them to be a different color, so I'll glaze them separately and then glaze the lid separate, and then eventually either epoxy the handle on or just melt it on in the kiln and another fire and fire it to cone 10 again, or 5, whatever you prefer.